We'll go ahead and get started. I'm sorry, I said my name and then hit recording. So Laura Franke, Housing Development Consortium of Seattle King County. We welcome you to today's session where we are going to be introducing our DAHN program to you with our colleagues that are participating in the task force, part of the task force, and then looking forward to also having speakers from the Department of Commerce who are going to talk to us about the Clean Building Performance Standard after we've introduced our DAHN program. So good lineup today, and I'm going to go ahead and jump right in with sharing my screen, and then we'll keep it rolling here. Please put your comments into the chat, and after I'm done screen sharing, I can look at those, or perhaps people can see them along the way that are not screen sharing. So let our speakers kind of manage that as we go. I thought I had it all set up. Okay, let's get started here. So today we're going to talk about our program, and I'm going to skip the agenda, but basically we're going to hear from a whole slate of people about how HDC is trying to help our affordable housing constituents work their way through the decarbonization maze and all the regulations, as well as some really good news about all of the services that are available to help us. So our goal is to keep you informed on what the regulations are and how to approach that as a property owner or a building manager, asset manager. Everybody's going to kind of get rolled into this at some point, I think. Right now, we are in a really good place as far as having a number of technical and financial resources that are getting put into place and stood up here with launches starting as early as this fall to help with a number of the steps to meet the compliance standards, as well as just to kind of help you get your heads around how should we be thinking about this, what do we actually have to do. So let's start out with a definition. What is decarbonization? Decarbonization is the process of reducing and ultimately eliminating greenhouse gas emissions from buildings. And I'd like to thank Elevate for this very concise statement. But basically, we want to just help everybody, look at what is decarbonization and also consider it in the bigger envelope of the performance standards that we have at the state level. So there's performance and there's decarbonization. They are different, but they're related and so closely that we are actually trying to help you conquer both of them simultaneously. So you'll hear us use the terminology interchangeably at some points, but they are two separate things. Next slide is, so here's some strategies that are ways that we can start thinking about how this is going to impact your buildings. So the first step is efficiency, and basically this is just making sure that your building is using as little energy as possible in its current standing. So it's making sure that there are seals around your windows and doors, that your insulation is up to capacity, and thinking about when you're doing appliance upgrades or making switches to your systems, what kind of electrical appliances could be installed. So then you're getting into electrification. You start out with Energy Star, then going into electrification, you can think about maybe if you've got some gas units or things that are creating emissions, what can you do to electrify those components? And then going a step further, it's thinking about resiliency. So what types of renewable generation can you put into your buildings or use across different resources, and also looking at how you can make your building more clean and healthy for your residents. So a lot of different ways to do this. I'm not going to read these all to you, but kind of get the gist of it. Final slide here in this segment is we want to make sure that we're helping you to think about starting early and integrating systems wide. So as you can imagine, when you start doing building upgrades, these are going to need to be thought about comprehensively, not only building by building, but also across the portfolio. So as you're learning about decarbonization and building systems as it relates to these new regulations, we want to make sure that you're broadening the scope and giving others an opportunity to participate in this, because ultimately everybody from your asset management, property management staff to your funders and your capital planners, O&M, everybody's going to get drawn into this. So basically from this point going forward, it's really important whenever you're doing capital planning to be thinking about how will this impact my regulatory needs in the future, and who do we need to bring into the fold in order to make sure that we're making decisions that are meeting the needs of our building, but also thinking more broadly of what our future regulatory meeting is going to be required to do. So I'm gonna step down and mute myself here and turn it over to Becky Bicknell for the next session.
Yeah, hi everyone, Becky Bicknell with Walsh Construction, and we're just gonna keep walking through some of the reasons that we're doing this. The goal of our efforts is to really have about 3 benefits, and it's making upgrades to your buildings, and with the hope that you're benefiting your residents and your staff, and also providing benefit to our climate. So sort of mutual goals in these efforts, but the hope is that you're really improving performance while also improving the environmental impacts of your buildings. Keep going. And sort of why now? So there's a handful of reasons that HTC is really getting organized on this, and it's we're all realizing that we need to reduce our emissions, and we're now in a place where there's been a lot of financial resources that have come to the table to help in these efforts, and for a long time the focus was on new construction, and we're now shifting to really put more resources into existing buildings, which is great. And the resources are also coming in the form of technical assistance. So there's just a lot of public and private action on this happening now, which is great in spite of some federal developments, but there's still a lot of momentum in the positive direction. And there's also evolving legislation. And so we have enacted legislation at both the Washington and City of Seattle level that operators are going to have to comply with for buildings over 20,000 square feet. So that includes all residential buildings over 20,000 square feet, which we'll talk about in a minute. So in terms of thinking about it, for some of you, these efforts will really align with existing portfolio planning efforts. If you're already have an asset management team looking at your whole portfolio, hopefully what DAHN will do is help really align and support your efforts. And for those of you who aren't there yet, or maybe have, don't have asset management teams, this will hopefully really also provide efforts to help you start to get organized. So we really want to meet owners where they're at and provide both technical and financial resources along the way. So we're going to walk through, what some of the steps look like in terms of compliance with legislation. But again, the idea is that owners are looking at their buildings from a portfolio standpoint, figuring out which buildings will need to be upgraded, and then plan for those upgrades, implement those upgrades, and then set up a good plan for operating and reporting. So if you go to the next slide, the idea is that DAHN is really engaging at all steps of this. So again, as we've said, our goal is to really be a hub of resources in the planning efforts, bringing technical resources to the table, bringing money to the table, and just really supporting all steps of the process. And I'm going to turn it over to Dave Reddy to talk about these programs.
Thanks, Becky. Yeah, so I'm going to speak a little bit about the regulatory framework that is going to encourage decarbonization and something that everybody should be putting on their radar in the starting now, really. So people, if you haven't heard, in Washington State, we have a building performance standard called the Clean Building Performance Standard, and that covers all of Washington. And as of, I think it was in 2022 that it was expanded to include buildings greater than 20,000 square feet and including multifamily. So will apply to the buildings that we manage and support. And people should understand that its metric for the performance determining performance is what's called EUI, or energy use intensity. I'm sure if you've been following exemplary buildings and a lot of other kind of ESDS different rating standards, it's probably a term you maybe already be aware of. It's kind of like a miles per gallon for your building. It is based on measuring site energy. So at your meter, you take those kilowatt hours and therms and you convert it to energy, and you divide it by your floor area. Then in Seattle, we have what's called BEPS, the Building Emissions Performance Standard. It is only a standard that applies within Seattle, and it uses a different metric, greenhouse gas intensity, or GHGI, is kind of similar idea as EUI in that it is a metric that is kind of as an indicator of performance, but it is you take the energy that you use at the site and you convert it to greenhouse gas emission equivalent. And then you divide that by the floor area and you get your GHGI. So what people should take away is there are two different standards that if you're within Seattle, you are covered by both. They have different metrics, and those metrics will encourage different decarbonization strategies. But
Hey, David, I can't really hear you. Can you speak up a little bit?
oh yeah, I'm sorry. In general, they'll both push you to make your building more efficient and towards decarbonization. Next slide, please.
David, your audio's really, really soft. If you can, I don't know, get closer to the microphone.
Yeah.
There you
How's
go.
this? Any better?
Much better. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry about that. So this maps out the timeframes for the two performance standards. One thing that both are in kind of start enacted now, but the activities you want to keep in mind that you're going to start doing are benchmarking, verification, and reporting. The timeframes for starting that you should keep in mind are basically around 2027. The between 2027 is when you need to report to the state your EUI and there's what's called the EMP, Energy Management Plan. And then also for Seattle, similar reporting requirements. And then if we go to the next slide, Laura, I think, see if the updates I made pulled through. Yeah. This kind of gives you your buildings. Again, Seattle, you're going to have to verify your benchmarking between 27 and 2030, and then start meeting an emission target for assuming you are low-income housing and human service use. You would need to meet those targets at the end of our next decade. So In Washington, the reporting is due in July 1st, 2027. There are some early adopter incentives for completing that reporting early, and targets are published, but they are not required to be met until the legislature adopts formal targets for multifamily and other tier 2 buildings, as they're called. So those are anticipated in the next decade. So I'll turn it over to Faith. Sorry, was that audio any better?
It's a lot better. Thank you. We
Okay.
got you.
Thanks
Hi,
for
everyone. I'm Faith Graham at Elevate. Thank you so much for being here, and thanks for the presenters beforehand to get us to this spot. So, okay, now what? Actually, if you can go back a little bit. Yeah, perfect. So, operating affordable housing is complex. And now we've got two standards that you also need to comply with, and that may feel a little complex or complicated as well. But the great news is, and consistent with what everyone else has said before me, right now, many public and private partners are mobilizing to provide technical assistance and financial resources for compliance. So in the next couple of slides, we're going to share some of the resources we're tracking, but what we're sharing today is really just a snippet. There are many more opportunities that are coming, and we're going to share what we're tracking in a targeted way over the next many months. This is going to come through the DAHN task force, including through this lunch and learner venue. So now we can go to the next slide. Thank you. One way to start making sense of this complexity and to identify decarbonization strategies and compliance requirements across your portfolio is with a decarbonization portfolio analysis. So rather than making decisions primarily based on emergency needs, something everyone does occasionally, a decarbonization portfolio analysis can help paint the big picture across your portfolio and support you in measuring performance and prioritizing efficiency actions so you can be proactive, take advantage of financial opportunities, invest smarter for compliance. You can go to the next slide, please. So what are the steps for a decarb portfolio analysis? Essentially, it's a logical data-driven approach. First, we collect housing characteristic and utility data for each of the properties. Then we analyze the data to prioritize energy and water efficiency, electrification opportunities, and solar investments for both short and long-term measures across all properties. So we're taking advantage of a phased approach. At the end of the day, the deliverable is a roadmap for decarbonization investments across your portfolio, customized to your individual priorities and to your specific compliance situation. And each of your properties will have a different one within your portfolio. It describes the portfolio's current performance. It tells you which properties to prioritize and what upgrades or retrofits to pursue. Overall, it's meant to be a resource that informs your capital planning decisions and helps you be more strategic about your decarbonization investments. Here, I want to drop in a little early public service announcement. In the coming weeks, we will be sharing the details of an opportunity for a couple of owners to work with us and receive portfolio planning services free of charge. If you're interested in taking advantage of that opportunity, feel free to reach out to me. I'll put my email contact information in the chat so you can access me. But as I said, don't worry about missing the opportunity. We'll share more details through HDC soon. So moving on to the next slide, please. And just a second, I've lost you on my screen. Excellent. As I said, when we started sharing, and Becky said the same, and Laura said the same, there are a number of resources coming your way. And here are a couple of partners that you can count on, and most of them, I think, are on the call today as well, to provide different kinds of valuable assistance. So King County, for example, is the administrator for a climate pollution reduction grant. It's a big one, and it's getting deployed now and over the fall. They will be deploying $50 million of grant funding, and with that is an opportunity for free benchmarking for properties in King County. I understand Seattle City Light is collaborating on that measure for benchmarking in the city of Seattle. So more opportunities and more information to come on that. Also commerce, they'll be talking to us later in the same presentation. So they'll be talking about the Clean Building Portfolio Standard. Of course, there's also, many of you have probably heard about the Multifamily Building Efficiency Grant Program, again, funding this very same type of program. The Housing Finance Commission has low interest loans available, and utilities have a variety of multifamily resources available to move decarbonization projects forwards. All of these things we are tracking, and we'll be sharing with you at future events, but also know that post-meeting we'll share links to the resources that we're tracking as well. So I think with that, I want to go to this next slide and just, again, another opportunity. These Learn at Lunch series are really intended to be of service and to share information and provide more targeted resources. So here's what's coming up. Just wanted to point your attention to it. I'm sure you've seen invites already for the next one happening next week. But just to pull your attention to the opportunities that are coming. I think that's all I've got. So we can move to the next slide. Unless, Laura, there's something you wanted to share there? No? Okay, great.
Hi, this is John Heller from Ecotope. I was asked to do a quick summary of what the previous presenters have already quite adequately presented, but just to summarize what we're talking about here today, if it hasn't become clear already, is that new regulations are coming, but there are quite a few resources being pulled together to support housing providers meeting those new regulations, that there is a great deal of advantage to getting started early on this and taking advantage of those resources that are becoming available, and that this team, the Decarbonize Affordable Housing Now team of the Housing Development Consortium, is here to support that we will be a clearinghouse for both providing links to experts that can support you, as well as the financial resources and planning resources that can put you ahead of the curve in preparing to deliver your portfolios to compliant positions. And so keep in touch with Laura at the Housing Development Consortium as kind of the person who will be the traffic controller for all of your questions.
Thanks, John. So I just want to acknowledge our DAHN task force participants. This is your logo set of everybody that's participating. We do have a number of additional sort of arm's length relationships with some with members, some with non-HDC members who are participating in advisory roles as well. But this is not just a HDC spinning our wheels alone. We've got a great support staff here on helping us think through this and put it all together. And lucky to have them, because as you saw at the beginning from my technical skills, I'm not an expert on all of this, but we're doing our best. So we're going to turn to the Department of Commerce for an update on the Clean Building Performance Standard. But before we do so, I'd like to open up the mic to the group and just see if there are any, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. See if there's any questions or comments or things in particular that folks have just kind of a burning desire to talk about, having had the high level perspective of what's going on here. All right. I know you're there.
This is Becky. I'll put a prompt question out there. I think one of the things that the the DAHN task force, we're still early and trying to get organized and again, really be this hub of resources. But we do really want to hear, like, what do people, especially operators, need or want the most from HDC, in these efforts. So, if those thoughts come to mind, you can share them here or, reach out to Laura and share them. But as we really start to get organized on the information we're going to share and how we're sharing it and how frequently we're sharing it, we just love to hear from folks about what's most beneficial for you.
One thing that occurred to me as I was presenting this, I don't think I really talked, or does everybody here know what emissions are versus energy? Because those are the two main metrics we're talking about for characterizing building performance. And the way I like to think of emissions, I think everybody understands energy, kilowatt hours, therms. Emissions, though, are representative of the impact in terms of CO2 equivalent of those using those fuels, using that energy on the environment, specifically in the context of its impact on global warming. So I think that's those two differences really differ and make a big difference in terms of how you characterize performance. And using emissions will more drive you towards using electrifying and decarbonizing faster than reducing energy use. So that's just something that I feel like I didn't really talk about, but if people are ever wondering.
So, Jess, hi. Yeah, we are actually in the process of working on a website upgrade, and these all of these resources are going to start being available on our HTC DAHN website. It's literally like happening as we speak. I hope to have things more readily available in the coming week or two, but as a registrant to this session, you'll get a follow-up email with all of the links that we're talking about today. And hopefully we'll be able to start having a more robust website associated with all of these updates that are coming.
This is Andy with Beacon Development. Just a kind of response to Becky's prompt. One of the things that would be really helpful to see is kind of a quantification of maybe the cost savings or potentially gain, like profit from, like, one of the decisions we're making now is how many EV charging stations to put in at a development. And in trying to advise our client, who's, with some reason, I think, skeptical of how much they'll be used by that population currently. But, we have the option of installing 6 or 26 EV charging stations and have money in the contingency. And so things like that could help us know the price of installation and usage rates, things like, I guess that's a very granular piece of reducing emissions and steering it towards a certain type of energy, but that's like one example.
Andy, I think that I'm glad you brought that up. One thing to know is that the EV charging energy is not, you can deduct that from the energy use that you might have for your building when characterizing compliance with the performance standards. So you want to make sure you sub-meter that energy use so you can separate it out. And but it's still, I mean, as far as a decarbonization measure and future proofing, it's a really great idea. as we transition transportation to electric energy.
David,
as well.
your voice is fading out again.
Sorry, this mic is. Hopefully that came through. Meter your EV chargers. That's the summary.
Got it. Thanks.
I'll just add on to that briefly. We touched on this amongst ourselves yesterday, I think, in our call when we were talking about, you know, trying to put together some pro formas on what costs might look like. And the reality is, because every use case is a little bit different, it's very difficult to, you know, do pro formas in a vacuum. But one of the things that the task force is doing is we have a group that is looking at preparing case studies based on projects that are currently underway and those that may have already been completed. So there is tracking of these projects, and with the intent of actually creating some use cases so that some of this can be better quantified, because this is also new. We don't have a lot of, you know, actual projects to put the numbers around just yet, but it is part of our work group effort. So just know that more is going to be coming on that.
I'll also just say one more thing. I noticed there's a lot of funders or public agencies on the call. And so one of the things that HCC has already done and wants to continue to do is to really make sure we're looping in funding partners, especially the existing funders that owners are already working with, so that, these compliance timelines are, somewhat in the future, but they're not that far in the future. And so if you have a building that is coming in to get refinanced or recapitalized in the next 5 years, you really want to be keeping the BEPS and the BPS regulations in mind as you're performing, as you're going in and disrupting residents and doing a capital project. I think you really want to be in a mindset of saying, okay, are we doing this in a way that will if we're already tackling a project, should we expand it to make sure we're tackling any required energy improvements or emissions improvements? So again, keeping these standards in mind. And so, the hope is that owners are getting organized on it, but I think we also want the funding community to be organized so that you can be asking owners about this as capital projects are getting planned and executed in the next, before compliance is required, but so that, we don't want to have the painful situation of an owner doing a project and then having to come back in the next, 5 years down the road to have to, do more. So really trying to get organized on those capital improvement projects and refinancing efforts so that they're aligned with these regulations.
Thanks for that. Well, I'm just about ready to shift over to the second half of our presentation with the Department of Commerce. Before I do, I'll take a last call for any additional questions. You can unmute.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for your presentation. I guess just with regard to the concept of making sure capital improvement projects that are happening in the next couple of years are keeping these future compliance issues in mind. And maybe this is what the second half of the presentation is going to be about, but thinking about what are the additional funding resources that could provide that increased cost, and how do we make sure that any additional costs that are incurred as a result of this decarbonization are being taken into account as sort of making sure we're hitting those compliance, like pre-meeting compliance or whatever it is, sort of as those are being, as project budgets are being evaluated, right? Like, and groups are coming in for funding, making sure that those potentially additional costs are not looked down upon as extra, but as we're doing this now, so we don't have to do it again in 5 years.
Yeah, I think I'll start the answer, but I'll maybe even let some others chime in. But I think, my sense is that maybe unlike even the new constructions exemplary buildings efforts, there are so many more resources on the table right now. And so I think HDC's goal will be to make sure that information is shared about how to access those resources. There's application timelines, all of that, and also be looking at how they play with existing funding and existing ownership structures and all those fun things in tax credit projects. So I think the idea is to really have an evolving sharing of resources for all the funding that's coming to the table, and what are the eligibility criteria and all that, so that owners can really say, okay, I've got to do the auditing and understanding, how much work might need to be done. But once the scopes of work start to be developed, then understanding the money that's out there to help cover it.
Yeah, I think I would add that I think we're trying to encourage early planning and take advantage of those resources to do that. So you have more shovel-ready projects that can incorporate large amounts of funding that it might be needed for projects. That's going to be, I think, what we see in a big advantage. And I would say one thing that in conversations and talking about doing this work with clients has been a concern in Seattle with triggering substantial alterations. And that so thus far for decarbonization projects, that even pretty significant ones, major system changes, the working with SDCI have been able to get clear indication that it is not a substantial alteration. So it does require working with SDCI to kind of describe what you're going to do and get that sorted out. But I think it's promising. We're going to continue to work with SDCI. That's one of our priorities, to streamline that as much as possible so that people can make decisions, not avoid investing a lot of upfront work, assuming they can do the decarbonization work without having to necessarily address other issues that may be needed. But yeah, so just something to think about.
Thanks for the question. I think we're at the point where we should probably go ahead and bring in our next speakers. So I'd like to welcome Jeff Rasmussen and Derek Cockle, who will be joining us from the Department of Commerce to talk about the Clean Building Performance Standard and the Tier 2 early adopter opportunities. And so without further ado, Jeff, are you ready to roll here?
Yeah, you bet. Good morning, or actually afternoon. We have crossed over. So, well, thank you again for the invite. My name is Jeff Rasmussen, Department of Commerce's Clean Buildings team. I'm an Outreach and Education Program Manager for the Clean Buildings Unit. And with me here is Derek, who is our Tier 2 Incentive Program Manager. And I know we were with you all last fall in October to introduce for the first time for many, the tier two program and introduce some of the incentives. And since then, we've just had a large amount of updates that have happened. And so today, I really wanted to kind of highlight some of those updates for you, and especially go a little more in depth with the tier two incentive program, which is where Derek will speak to that here as well. So I'm going to go ahead and share screen if you don't mind. Okay. So, and I'll just go through these relatively quickly because I know for a lot of folks on here, this is old information or just a refresher, but I'll send this to Laura, if you don't mind, Laura, afterwards for to distribute out as well. Again, Department of Commerce, we touch just about every corner of the state, from housing to broadband infrastructure, community services, and of course, we're here in energy. Some of the points that we'll touch on in our brief time here today, see there. But this is something very, very exciting, given the environment that we're in, that I'm thrilled to share, is our growth of our staff, and a lot of that's driven by the need of this program throughout the state. So when I was here last fall, pretty much I think that there were maybe 10, 12 folks on staff, and now we've just continued to add to our team like crazy. So the good news is that this is a big addition to our support structure, and being able to support the communities and the building owners and those that are serving, representing the clean buildings performance standards. So again, reasons why we're here is emissions from our larger buildings throughout the state. Second leading cause of emissions, right behind transportation. So this information is from 2020, so it's relatively recent in perspective. But the last information we got along this lines was from 2015, I believe. And we've made some strides for the better, but as you can see here, there's just still some room to go and progress to be made, but we continue chipping away at it with the efforts that the state is making. Why the performance standard? So this is as a result of the Clean Buildings Law, which passed the legislation in 2019. Initially, it was to create energy efficiency measures in our largest buildings over 50,000 square feet, which are known as the Tier 1 buildings. And then a couple of years later, as many know, expanded to Tier 2 buildings, which are buildings between 20,000 and 50,000 square feet, as well as multifamily buildings over 20,000 square feet. And I'll talk a little bit more about this as well, but through each process here, Commerce is charged with the rulemaking of the different rules, the notifying of building owners, administering incentives, and supporting mandatory compliance. Another highlight since last time we met is our timeline here. I believe when we met in October last year, we were just finishing up the decarbonization and district energy system rulemaking and finalizing that. Since then, in this last legislature cycle, House Bill 1543 passed, and we are currently in the rulemaking process for that. That is establishing alternative compliance pathways, exemptions, and extensions. And so if you've been working through the process already, it's a pretty rigid, kind of a box type of compliance. This is hopefully going to expand and give some more flexibility to many of our building owners across the state as far as ways to comply and how to comply. And we are coming into our second rulemaking workshop, which is next Wednesday, July 23rd at 10 a.m. And when I send this to Laura to distribute, I'll include the information on that workshop if you're interested in participating. Again, just a quick overview of a Tier 2 building. Tier 2 building is a building between 20,000 square feet and 50,000 square feet. Parking garages are excluded from that measurement, and then multifamily buildings over 20,000 square feet are also included as a Tier 2 building. And just to clearly define a multifamily building of what that is, continuous sleeping units of 5 or more. We get a lot of questions in that regards about condos, and so condos, here's our compliance with that. Ultimately, what it is the condo buildings, because they're made up of individual single-family residences, essentially. It's that common area within the building that may be subject to the clean building performance standards. So if a common space within a condo building exceeds the 20,000 square feet, then the performance standards would apply in this case. Otherwise, condo building may not necessarily have to comply with the standards. So earlier this month, July 1st, we rolled out Tier 2 notifications to nearly 25,000 building owners across the state. And so our office has been extremely busy responding to the numerous inquiries coming into our office in regards to those letters. If you're one of them that's reached out to us and we haven't responded, my apologies and gratitude for your patience on that. As I said, we've been receiving a lot of questions, a lot of inquiries and so forth like that. So we continue to work through that. And here's our timeline for the Tier 2. So we are currently in the reporting. So early compliance for Tier 2 buildings is open, as well as incentive applications as well, which Derek will talk about. Come 2027, that's when that Tier 2 reporting is finalized. That's when Tier 2 buildings must comply with the standard. And then 2029, we evaluate the benchmarking data and report to the legislature. And just to give a comparison to the Tier 2 buildings versus the Tier 1 buildings, again, Tier 2 buildings opened this first of this month and have compliance deadline of July 1st, 2027. 3 basic requirements for the Tier 2 buildings: benchmarking, operation and maintenance program, and energy management plan. Again, unlike the Tier 1 buildings, the Tier 2 buildings do not have to meet that performance metric. They just have to develop it. And a side-by-side comparison between the Tier 1 and Tier 2. Again, primarily it's the building size, compliance dates, and then also the Tier 2 not having the performance metric to meet. And again, there are some exemptions and penalties. You can see here, very identical to the Tier 1 exemptions as far as the different categories. And again, refer back to the rulemaking of House Bill 1543. That could create some changes within the exemptions as well. The time frame for exemptions, no sooner than 2 years prior to the compliance date, no later than 180 days. And again, that's a little different than the Tier 1 buildings. So if you're working both Tier 1 and Tier 2, just keep that in mind. And again, the exemptions, once approved, last for the compliance cycle, which is every 5 years. Tier 2 penalties, pretty straightforward. It's 30 cents a square foot with the size of the building. So if you got a 20,000 square foot building, that is the non-compliance penalty for a Tier 2 building of 20,000 square feet. Again, refer back to the House Bill 1543, which could offer some flexibility as well. All right. And then I am going to turn it over to Derek here.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, so for the tier 2 incentives, the program just launched here on July 1st. That program incentivizes completion of the tier 2 reporting requirements. That's going to, again, that launched July 1st, and it will, though compliance documentation needs to be submitted by July 1st of 2027. The program itself, as far as the payments being able to be administered, that runs through June 1st of 2030. And we have 150 million available for those incentives. The eligibility to receive the incentive must be a tier 2 covered building, must be served by a participating utility. For King County, that's mostly going to be Puget Sound Energy, Seattle City Light. They are utilities who serve more than 25,000 customers are required to participate in the program. So most folks should have a participating utility there. And then finally, the building must comply with the tier 2 requirements by July 1st of 2027. So that's submitting your benchmarking data, energy management plan, and operations and maintenance program. Thank you. So that base incentive for the tier 2 program, that is eligible to everyone who submits compliance documentation. All tier 2 building owners who submit compliance documentation before July 1st of 2027. That base incentive starts at 30 cents per gross square foot of eligible space. Parking garages, parking lots, those are not included. And then there's also an enhanced incentive we've been able to put into place. And that goes up to 75 cents per gross square foot for multifamily building owners willing to sign an anti-displacement agreement. The gist of that anti-displacement agreement, essentially states that rents will not be increased as a result of coming into compliance with the standard, so that cost of compliance will not be passed on to renters. We are working through adding some additional enhancement qualifications, but there have been some details and barriers that we still need to address in order to get those implemented. But those are in the works. And then we have published the Tier 2 Early Adopter Incentive Guidebook. So that provides just kind of some background of the program, step-by-step process of how to apply there in the Clean Buildings portal. And the application itself is intended to be fairly simple for folks. So it's really just an extension of the compliance application. So you will, log into the portal, start submitting your compliance documentation. Once that's submitted, you will let us know, if you're interested in applying for the incentive. If you are eligible to receive the enhanced incentive, you can also submit that documentation. And then from there, we will review and we will follow up with building owners and then with the participating utility, who is the one that is actually making the payment to building owners. I think it's important to mention that as the utilities will be the ones that are issuing the payments, not Commerce themselves, or not Commerce ourselves. Each utility may have some different needs from the building owners, including like a W-9, just to be sure they're getting the payment to the correct person. So the program has just kicked off, so we're tweaking and making adjustments, making it easier for folks as we move along. So if you have any feedback, please don't hesitate to reach out to us and let us know how we can make this process easier for you. Thank you, Jeff. I'll hand it back over to you.
Thanks, Derek. All right, just to kind of wrap this up again, we know the process and what this looks like, and every building's different and unique, and so we are here to help. Again, we've got our Clean Buildings team. behind the scenes working to help support either through our customer support ticket or email. Invite everyone to please reach out if they do have questions as far as how to comply or the incentives or you know, the building that you own is inaccurate with the square footage, please let us know so we can help support that. We offer our monthly Clean Buildings Performance office hours on the fourth Tuesday of every month at 10 a.m. And then, as many are familiar, because I heard it earlier, talking about the accelerator program and Energy Start Portfolio Manager. And then we also have our Smart Building Center as a no-cost resource support. Again, just some of the outreach and education that we continue to do, building owner notifications. We put out a weekly Clean Buildings Bulletin. If you're not signed up to receive those, strongly encourage that you do. That's where we do put out a lot of our updates and upcoming workshops and so forth like that. We continue to host live Q&A sessions, many in virtual, some in person. And then as we can get back into it, we'll continue doing the recorded videos and trainings and add those to our website. Should note that all of our rulemaking workshops are also recorded and posted on our website. So if you missed the info session last month or the workshop one earlier this month, welcome to go back and review those as well. This is an exciting addition to our team. It's the Beacon project that officially launched. Building owner support, $10 million from the Department of Energy, with just over $7 million dedicated for the Beacon program. And this will run from January 2025 to December 2029. We do have Beacon Fellows in place in the communities, and this is to help offer the in-person support to the building owners and their energy managers or their contractors that they've hired to participate in this. And you can see here kind of what the fellows have been tasked to do. I believe, last I heard, and Derek, I don't know if you have a more accurate number, I believe there's 19 currently in place throughout the state with the intent to, of course, add more as well. But they're tasked with outreach and education, portal support, helping with benchmarking, the management planning, and operation and maintenance. And so again, very quick overview, and happy to answer any questions that have come up or anything that Derek and I can help support you with.
Jeff, this is, oh, Dave, do you want to go?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Great. Yeah, a question on the anti-displacement agreement terms that it talks about not changing rents within the compliance cycle for related to being in compliance. For tier 2 buildings, the only requirement for compliance is to report, right? Where there's no, so is it just saying rents can't be changed in response to doing the benchmarking, reporting, and energy management plans?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, we were in research that we had done as far as various pricings, for providing those services. We just wanted to be sure that we could at least cover, possibly cover the full cost of compliance for certain buildings. I think 75 cents is the maximum. 75 cents a square foot is the maximum a building owner could receive, but we're also asking for folks to report that cost of compliance, or the estimated cost of compliance, which would be the roof there. So if that came in under the 75 cents a square foot, that would be the maximum of the incentive we would be able to pay back.
Great, thank you.
Jeff or Derek, can you guys can you walk through that compliance timeline a bit? Because the owners are going to go through this process of benchmarking and reporting. so they've got to be compliant with that. But then is there an expectation that if a building is not performing to a certain standard, that then it needs to make improvements to the building to then meet a standard? I saw you had a note about no performance target or no.
Yeah. No, and that's one of the differences with tier 1 versus tier 2. So tier 1, yes, you have to develop and meet that performance metric. And so in some cases for the tier 1 buildings, it could be capital improvement costs, or simply some building owners I've connected with changed out their heating control systems. So it could be very simple or very complex. With the tier 2 buildings, there is no performance metric to meet. However, so it's developing that plan and identifying to basically become more energy efficient. Now, in 2029, in that timeline that I showed earlier, because one of the requirements is to benchmark for tier 2 buildings as well. We're taking that benchmarking data, reporting to the legislature, and then from there, determining if there should be a performance metric for tier 2 buildings as well. So at this point, there's not the metric to meet for tier 2 buildings. However, we just have to benchmark and develop that plan to get there.
Got it.
Yeah, I would say that level of uncertainty on what the target might be has been a real challenge for our clients. I mean, even building a building to current energy code for some buildings is right on that line of what the current target is. So you have this conversation with owners like, well, you're meeting code, but you might not meet what the published standard is. So that's been a real challenge from our end, and trying to how to guide them. Do you invest now, speculatively assuming there will be a target, or wait? So.
Well, and again, you might have a building that already had a plan to do a significant capital project, before this timeline, and so, like, again, in the next, whatever, up to 6 years. And so having a metric to have in mind if they're taking on that project would be really beneficial, so that, again, they're not having to come back, 4 years later and do more work that's really disruptive and might not be financially feasible and all that. So, Jonathan.
Yeah, I had a question to follow up on the agreement not to raise rents for clarification. Is that no rental increase at all for 5 years, or no rental increase that's directly associated with the cost of compliance? And how do you prove that?
Correct. Yeah, it's directly associated with the cost of compliance. And this is it's kind of moving forward, with the best intentions. That folks that are, submitting this, signing this anti-displacement agreement, and agreeing to this, to not raise rents as a result of coming into compliance with the standard, that they are signing this agreement in a good faith effort. And then, we worked with our AAG, to have the document be established to such a point that we would be able, if a tenant or a renter, came back and said, well, I feel like the rent was raised on me, and this was the reason that was given, or whatever, that Commerce could then, pursue action, to get those incentive funds back. But again, this is a good faith effort, with best intentions, and with an understanding that, multifamily building owners, folks that are renting out, have very thin margins, and can use a little bit additional support.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Can I add on one thing that hopefully we can engage on is are you all familiar with utility allowances? for a subsidized rent. That's an area where we've in looking at these decarbonization projects, they are going to make the building more efficient, and things like putting a heat pump in a dwelling unit that would actually reduce the tenant's utility costs. And owners have looked at trying to leverage that savings to the tenant by adopting what's called a modeled utility allowance, which is a better characterization of the rent, the utilities that the tenant will be paying. That would effectively increase the rent a little bit, a couple of dollars a month on typically, but those couple of dollars a month can make a big difference on the pro forma. So just want to kind of understand better when you do decarbonization activities, if owners can take advantage of reducing utility allowances to make up for the fact that they have more efficient systems. Maybe that's a separate discussion, but that's something I think around that rent increase question, people will need answers to before they sign up.
Right. So I think what, David, you're asking is, can we promise not to raise rent plus utilities? If
Yeah.
utilities goes down $5 a month, can we raise rents $5 a month and call it equal?
Exactly. Yeah.
Appreciate that. And and I think for, there's a difference. We have these incentives programs, and then we also have grant programs, to do like actual energy efficiency measures, for specific projects. So I think it's also trying to find a balance between how we can, run this kind of a somewhat passive incentive program versus what may need to be in place, or what options we have for implementing similar structures in like a projects-based specific energy efficiency measures grant program. And as we get closer to 2032, once we understand what those possible impacts of if meeting a metric is required, then what supports can we put in place, as far as like funding and programs? How can we work with the legislature and communicate those needs, as well as far as what funding is needed? That would be, some of the things that we would look at. We're trying to be, part of that solicitation, part of that eligibility for projects like that. Thank you.
Have you guys done intentional coordinating with the housing team at Commerce? And we're just thinking of, identifying those buildings that are in portfolio already that are 20,000 square foot and above. And
we have a little bit. We've had, kind of conversations just trying to understand the programs, the work that they are doing, and, communicating the work that we're doing. But as far as kind of integrating, the two programs, or having, both moving in the same direction, together, we still are, kind of having those conversations and really trying to develop and understand that. And there's been, granted, there's been a lot of change recently, just kind of in leadership, and and from the governor's office all the way down. So, that we need a lot of that dust to kind of settle, in order to really have those, those big picture directions and be able to move forward along with those lines. But we are having those conversations, and yeah, and I appreciate you bringing that up again.
I think for all levels of government, there's the affordable housing owners are very used to working with certain departments at the city, at the county, at the state, and getting communication from those entities around asset management, portfolio management. And so I think to the extent you can really align with those existing systems of communication in particular, could be valuable. Just again, owners might pay attention more to, having it come through those existing channels versus someone new who, yeah.
Yeah, I
familiar
appreciate
with.
that. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Just real quick, if I may, I want to go back to the timeline in regards to the performance metric for tier 2 again. So the question about meeting the performance metric, or because tier 2 doesn't have to meet the performance metric, but it's being reviewed by the legislature to possibly have a performance metric. In regards to the timeline, just to kind of break it down a little bit more. So compliance deadlines for tier 2 buildings are July 1st, 2027. And then, so again, that starts that 5-year compliance cycle for those tier 2 buildings. 2 years after the compliance deadline is when it's being reviewed. Actually, we would have been reviewing, and the report goes to the legislature at that point. And that's where they'll determine if there should be a performance metric to meet. If they decide that yes, there is a performance metric that needs to be met, whatever rule, and again, as I understand, this would go through the rulemaking process like what we're going through House Bill 1543. But those essentially would not go into effect until 2032 when the next compliance cycle comes up. So I don't know if there was a concern of just having a 2-year timeline on that, but as I was listening to the feedback, which I greatly appreciate, I just want to make sure that it's understood that any new rules with the performance metric wouldn't come into play until 2032, if they do come into play. Hopefully that helps.
Jeff, what's the timing for any changes that come about from 1543? Is that what you're talking about specifically? Or
No,
would those
yeah.
be on a different timeline?
Yeah, so 1543 is completely different. So what I was referring to is in regards to the question about performance metrics for tier 2. So again, those are being reviewed and report to the legislature in 2029. And then if they decide that there is a performance metric that needs to be met at that point, whatever rule goes into place through the rulemaking process at that time wouldn't go into effect until 2032. Now, House Bill 1543, which again covers alternative pathways, exemptions, and extensions, went through and passed the legislature this last legislative session. We're currently in the rulemaking process. We anticipate through the workshops and public comments and public hearing process that that should be wrapped up. I believe November is kind of our tentative timeframe, which means that as long as there's no major delays or anything like that, whatever rules are codified based off of that rulemaking process would go into effect the first of the year.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there any guarantee it won't be less than the targets? The targets aren't anticipated to go down, but if they were.
Yeah, that I don't know.
Okay.
I can't imagine it would, but
Right.
yeah, that's just what my gut says.
Thank you.
Really appreciate you guys sticking around for the conversation. This is super helpful. Any other questions from the participants that are still left here? Still open to taking questions on the first part of the session, but this is clearly more urgent right now for conversation. All right, well, here hearing none, I think we're gonna give folks back 7 minutes of their blocked off time here, and really thank you, Derek and Jeff, both for joining us and participating in this important update. I'd like to thank my co-speakers, Faith, David, Becky, and John, who are on our engagement team at the DAHN task force. And hope for all of you that are listening to this on a recording that you're able to get as much information as we were able to share and hear about today. So thank you all for your time, and we'll see you all soon. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.